Greetings and welcome to another insightful episode of Lodha & Co. ESG Practice Podcast. I'm your host for today, Anuradha Menon, and today we are diving deep into a topic that's not only crucial for the business world but for our planet as well, assessing the carbon footprint of corporations. Joining us today to shed light on this important subject is Ms. Vrushti Gada, an avid researcher and consultant with Lodha & Co. She's currently working on a carbon footprinting initiative at our workplace. Thank you, Vrushti, for joining us today.
Thank you, Anuradha, for the kind introduction.
So, Vrushti, to begin with, could you provide our listeners with an insight into what exactly a carbon footprint signifies and shed light on the journey that led to its emergence?
So, a carbon footprint is a measure of amount of greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide, emitted into the atmosphere as a result of individuals' activity or organizational activity, or it may be any activity or event that may be man-made or natural. The concept of carbon footprint was born as a part of the ecological footprint. The idea had gained popularity in the year 2003 when an oil and gas company called British Petroleum had launched an advertising campaign asking people on the street what their carbon footprint was. So this ad basically encouraged people to calculate their carbon footprint or personal carbon footprint using British Petroleum Company's calculator to assess their own carbon footprint, what their own carbon footprint was. Because of that, the focus of the carbon footprint remained largely on the individuals, despite there were companies who were emitting much more problematic levels of emissions. And coming back to the recent times, the only time when world had experienced such a drop in emissions was due to global pandemic and strict lockdowns implemented to stop the spread of COVID-19. In 2020, global carbon dioxide emissions were estimated to have dropped by almost 8% as compared to the year 2019. And as the effects of climate change have come into focus in the recent years, there has been an increasing pressure on the organizations to reduce their carbon footprint and address climate change. The investors, the customers, as well as the employees are increasingly looking for companies that are taking action to reduce their carbon footprint. In addition, the regulators worldwide are creating rules requiring organizations to report an accurate carbon footprint to ensure compliance, avoid climate risk, and improve their standing as progressive organization. Companies have actually taken measures to accurately measure their emissions. And that's the reason Paris Agreement has also set out global framework to avoid dangerous climate change by limiting the global warming to well below 2 degrees centigrade and pursuing efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees centigrade. The aim is to strengthen countries' ability to deal with the impacts of climate change and support them in their efforts.
That was very informative, Vrushti. Thank you. So, what are the compelling reasons for this assessment of carbon footprint by businesses? What do you think about that?
So, measuring your emissions is first and foremost useful in getting to know how and where your company's operations and value chain emissions reductions can be achieved. Insight into your carbon footprint actually allows you to detect major sources of emissions throughout the business. From there, the reduction opportunities can be identified and reduction efforts can be prioritized based upon impact. This allows for the development of a reduction strategy that will result in meaningful emission cuts. It also provides opportunities to increase energy efficiency and cut back on energy costs. Apart from cutting down on emissions and energy costs, measuring emissions can create additional benefits for companies of all sizes.
So, could you provide us with concrete instances showcasing the diverse emission reduction strategies that businesses can effortlessly integrate once they gain insights into their carbon footprint?
So, it actually helps in aligning your business towards current climate regulations and climate ambitions. Measuring emissions will enable any entity to prepare for future regulations which otherwise might have a negative financial impact on the company and its value chain. A good method for aligning the business with the existing and upcoming regulations is by setting an internal carbon price. while at the same time seizing low carbon and efficiency opportunities. Carbon disclosure and transparency on reduction targets can benefit the company's competitive advantage and reputation. There are many investors nowadays that request companies to disclose their carbon footprint and reduction strategies. And this information is basically taken into account when deciding on investment and partnership. So, sustainability and climate concern will likely keep growing in importance to stakeholders in any market. Measuring, reducing, and disclosing your company's carbon footprint is key in keeping up with the demand for sustainable and climate conscious performance. For example, BlackRock, the world's largest shareholder, has illustrated that there is an increasing demand for disclosure and reduction from stakeholders and investors. BlackRock published a document stating its expectations for how companies should address climate risk and articulate their alignment to the global aspiration of limiting the global warming. Over the past few years, BlackRock increasingly emphasized that the companies it invests in should have clear policies on sustainability. It should include how to manage climate risk and realize opportunities presented by the global energy transition. As they rightly point out, the risk from climate change is an investment risk. So disclosures are necessary because climate risk is an investment risk. So market participants have a significant interest in understanding the size and scope of that risk.
Absolutely. So, could you elaborate on the interplay between emission measurement, preparedness for forthcoming regulations, and innovative concepts like internal carbon pricing?
So, carbon pricing basically refers to the mechanisms that incentivize a shift towards a low carbon economy by putting a price on the greenhouse gas emissions. So, internal carbon prices are set by corporates themselves. It has the potential to aid in low carbon transition by directing investments towards cleaner technologies. It effectively brings the cost of the environmental damage caused by GHG emissions back to the emitter. Companies actually have to pay a price for every ton of carbon dioxide they emit beyond the allowed limit. So there is a carbon emission trading system. Globally, there are many carbon pricing systems and that have been implemented in the form of emission trading systems, which are known as ETS, and carbon taxes. So an ETS is also referred to as cap and trade system. So caps are the total level of greenhouse gas emissions and allows those industries with low emissions to sell their extra allowances to the larger emitters. A carbon tax directly sets a price on carbon by defining a tax rate on the GHG, or more commonly on the carbon content of the fossil fuels. There are many organizations that are starting to build a carbon price into their business operations and investment decisions as a way to prepare for a low carbon economy and divert investment from carbon intensive activities. Companies can set an internal carbon price voluntarily to value the cost of unit of carbon dioxide emission. And this price can vary depending upon the trade regions and individual companies' objectives.
Your insights into the economic and non-economic consequences of a company's carbon footprint are truly bringing clarity. So could you offer practical steps or real-world examples illustrating how organizations have confronted the challenge of emission reduction?
So I believe that emissions can be expensive for companies. Lowering emissions typically goes hand in hand with increasing efficiency and cost effectiveness in a company's processes. Another trend is life cycle assessment, which can help in determining a product or service complete carbon impact. From raw material extraction through end of life disposal, LCA accounts for emissions across a product or service's life cycle. This lets companies find their emission reduction option across the entire value chain. Moreover, transparency and disclosure rates and accuracy are rising. So many businesses post carbon emission reports and other sustainability related information to demonstrate their commitment to sustainability and engage their stakeholders. Climate change makes emissions management more vital. By remaining informed of evolving trends using technology and planning for possible laws, enterprises may satisfy their compliance needs, achieve strategic benefits, and improve their reputation as sustainable businesses.
That's wonderful. Could you help us understand the strategies that empower companies to effectively communicate their sustainability endeavors to both consumers and stakeholders? So, this can help in brand reputation as well and societal expectations. So, could you bring clarity to that?
So, first is the economic impact. Higher carbon footprint is indicative of greater energy cost. Expenditure on energy bills could be channeled to other areas of the business that require more attention. Second is political impact. So, today, increased attention to national green policies and corporate social responsibility practices have pushed business to be more socially accountable to their employees, their stakeholders, and the wider public. It encourages companies to become more aware of how their business practices impact society and the environment. And third is the social impact. So people are becoming more and more conscious about sustainability, they are more likely to purchase ethical and sustainable products, with preferring brands and retailers to be transparent about their sustainability efforts. This shows that brand reputation is no longer only tied to the quality products and customer services, but also towards a business with green practices. Societal and environmental irresponsibility carry far greater consequences for companies. Consumers may choose to boycott that brand, inevitably leading to huge losses.
Thank you for the clarification, Rushdi. So, what roadblocks have you encountered in your carbon footprinting initiative at the workplace?
Carbon footprint calculations require a lot of data, and that's where most of the entities, including us, are facing challenges. For corporate office spaces, Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are still simpler to calculate. Scope 1 may involve company fuel combustion by company owned vehicles and fugitive emissions. Scope 2 may involve purchased electricity, but Scope 3, which involves emissions across the entire value chain, is difficult to calculate because, again, the amount of data required and collation of the same is a task. But now that there are n number of tools that are freely available to calculate emissions, I believe that this problem can also be solved.
That's great. So, could you share your insight into the future of emission management?
Reducing the carbon footprint plays a vital role in mitigating each of the side effects that are resulting in global climate change. For companies, carbon footprint reduction is critical in terms of compliance and stakeholder engagement. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science play a significant role in helping supply chain companies reduce their carbon footprint specifically. This will help them monitor their progress using data to understand if carbon emissions are truly being reduced. Major organizations are taking steps to become carbon neutral, and other companies can actually learn from their efforts. Amazon, for example, has recently agreed to disclose its carbon footprint and has stated that its goal is to have 50% of its deliveries have a net zero carbon footprint by 2030. Another example is Tata Group. They have implemented a 3C strategy. So first C is climate action. The company has a goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2030 and net zero by 2035. Second C is customer GHG savings. Reducing Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by financial year 2027 is their second goal. Third C is circular economies in India. The company plans to cut freshwater use by 20% by the year 2030 and to eliminate waste to landfill by 2027. Having such large businesses make this commitment to transparency and reduction is critical for showing smaller companies that change is both possible and important. Working on greenhouse gases doesn't immediately sound like an opportunity to cut operational costs and save money, but going green can have a positive effect on your bottom line in near future. Switching to energy efficiency, evaluating your suppliers, and making changes to the way your company operates can have higher financial benefits.
Thank you, Rushdi, for sharing your invaluable thoughts regarding this important carbon footprint assessment for corporations. So stay tuned for more compelling discussions. Thank you.